How companies are moving the diversity and inclusion needle. We have a distinguished corporate panel consisting of Kristen Eskew, Darlene Flagg, Barbara Turner, and our moderator, Angela Lapp-Johnson. And I'd like to give a special welcome and a thank you to our moderator, Angela Lapp-Johnson. You know, she is the founder and owner of Catalyst Recruiting, which was born out of the desire to help clients diversify and discover customized talent that meets their firm's needs. She's a talent acquisition executive with an exceptional depth of experience in the financial services industry, combined with a unique blend of business and sales leadership expertise. Often called an industry disruptor, Angela proudly embraces the moniker as she revolutionizes the industry by advancing the goals of diversity and inclusion. Thank you all for being with us. And Angela, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Wynn. It was beautiful. So while I'm disappointed to miss seeing everyone in person in Washington, D.C., I'm grateful for the opportunity to bring the Diversity Symposium online, allowing us to reach more financial service professionals and create an even greater impact. Each one of the panelists come from different backgrounds and have come into the financial services industry in their own unique ways, but they all share a few commonalities. They are women of color who are first in their roles and want to use their voice to share how their companies are moving the diversity and inclusion needle. Diversity, equity, and inclusion have become buzzwords recently, especially in financial services. I would like to introduce you to the women who are going to share what DEI means to them and how the industry as a whole can bring diversity to the table and include them into the conversation. So I'd like to first introduce Kristen Eskew. Kristen is a recruiting director at Consolidated Planning, a leading strategic financial planning firm in the Southeast, where she spearheads the firm's diversity and inclusion efforts. She is a super connector whose passion for people can be seen not only through her work in talent acquisition, but through her community involvement. She serves as a board member for the Abandoned Project and as an ambassador for the Relatives, both of which are local nonprofits in Charlotte, North Carolina. Kristen is committed to helping young people find confidence in their uniqueness and does so through public speaking to groups of high school and college students throughout North Carolina. Kristen is originally from Richmond Hill, Georgia, but considers the Queen City, Charlotte, to be her home. She's an alumna of the University of Carolina at Wilmington and has a bachelor's in communication studies. Outside of the office, Kristen loves cooking and eating, trail running, and all things interior design. She's a happy wife to her husband, Josh, and a proud aunt of 7 nieces and nephews, and a dog mom to Teddy and Maggie, 2 of the cutest pups you ever did see. Welcome, Kristen.
Thank you so much for having me. Honored to be here.
Next, I'd like to introduce Darlene Flagg. Darlene is the Assistant Vice President of Business Development for National Life Group. Darlene joined the company in July 2015 and is a member of the Distribution Innovation Group. She leads the Fixed Indexed Annuity and Balanced Opportunities platform. In her role, she focuses on growth in the public, K-14, and government markets. Her key responsibilities include institutional retirement sales, consultant, and third-party administration relations, RFP management, and partnering to set the company's strategic direction for the 403B and 457 retirement market growth. Darlene has over 18 years of senior management experience and 20 years of financial services marketing experience. Prior to joining National Life Group, she worked at Flagg, where she served as Vice President of Institutional Marketing, responsible for strategic group management, employer and employer education, creative services, requests for proposals, digital marketing, and new business development. Additionally, for 6 years, she was an adjunct professor at the University of Phoenix Houston campuses. Darlene serves as the Vice President on the Women in Insurance and Financial Services National Board, and in her position, she partners to attract, educate, and develop women. She also serves as a president-elect of the National Tax Deferred Savings Association. She is also a senatorial member of the American Retirement Association. Darlene received her bachelor's degree in communications from Seton Hall University in South Orange, New Jersey, and a master's degree in strategic communications from the same institution. She's a certified UIL high school basketball official. She has 2 adult children, and she loves singing, refereeing basketball, and spending time with her family. Welcome, Darlene.
Thank you so much for having me. It is truly an absolute honor to be here today.
Thank you. And last but definitely not least, I'd like to introduce Barbara Turner. Barbara Turner, CRPC, was named President and Chief Operating Officer of Ohio National Financial Services in November 2018. She's the 11th president and the first woman and person of color to hold this position at Ohio National Financial Services since its founding in 1909. So impressive. In addition to working with Ohio National Financial Services executive leadership team to develop and drive corporate strategy, Barbara oversees the functional areas responsible for executing the strategy, including distribution, sales, marketing, information technology, underwriting, operations, investments, claims, customer service and support, and Ohio National's retail chairman and chief administrative officer and a member of the office of the CEO. Barbara held the title Executive Vice President and Chief Administrative Officer from 2016 until August 2018. Barbara served as the annuities strategic business head in 2018. Previously, Barbara served as a president and CEO of the Ohio National Equity Sales Company, ONFS retail broker-dealer, and the Ohio National Investment Management Company. Under Barbara's leadership, UNESCO experienced record growth and profitability and was recognized as the top broker-dealer in the country by Financial Planning magazine. Again, impressive. Barbara also previously served as Senior Vice President and Chief Compliance Officer for ONFS. In this role, she developed and implemented the framework for ONFS's enterprise-wide corporate compliance and ethics program. Barbara has more than 39 years of experience in the financial services industry. She began her career in banking and was an operations trading and systems manager for Reynolds DeWitt Securities prior to joining Ohio National in 1997. Active in the industry and community, Barbara currently or in the past has served on the boards of Advocates for Youth Education, Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park, Cincinnati State Technical and Community College, Cincinnati USA Regional Chamber, Cincinnati Women's Executive Forum, Greater Cincinnati Foundation, LL Global Incorporated, United Way of Greater Cincinnati, and Women's Fund of the Greater Cincinnati Foundation. Barbara is also a member of the Cincinnati Regional Business Committee, Executive Leadership Council, and was the 2019 campaign chair for the American Heart Association, American Stroke Association, Great Rivers Affiliate, Go Red for Women campaign, and exceeding the fundraising goals of $1 million. Barbara is a native of Cincinnati and attended the University of Cincinnati. She was a member of the inaugural graduation class and the first woman in the country to complete the FINRA Wharton University Certified Compliance Profession Certification Program. She is also a graduate of the Wharton Securities Industry Institute and Leadership Cincinnati Class XL. She and her husband, Damon, are the proud parents of 3 adult children and 4 grandchildren. Barbara enjoys spending her time with her family, traveling, giving back to the community, enjoying Cincinnati art events, cooking, and reading. And she has a special interest in mentoring at-risk teenage girls and single moms and helping women and children achieve self-sufficiency and financial independence. Barbara launched the Ohio National Women's Network, OWN, in 2016 and has formally mentored or sponsored countless associates since joining Ohio National Financial Services. She attributes her success to her faith, family, work ethic, and strong support network. So we've got such a great lineup here today of amazing ladies. So let's jump right into it. So I'd like to start with Kristen. Kristen, you work on the agency side of the industry attracting talent to your firm. Can you share a little bit about how your firm has determined the need for a D&I program?
Yes. So Cammie kind of alluded to this in her introduction, but companies are beginning to realize that there is a responsibility and an economic value in being able to better represent the communities that they serve. So we're all trying to build these diverse teams because we realize when you have a group of people who all come from different cultures and backgrounds and that have different ways of thinking, that's great for things like innovation and problem solving, recruiting and retaining, basically an array of things that affect the bottom line. But for us, while we are well aware of the economic value, we truly started our efforts simply because it is the right thing to do. And there were a few pretty impactful moments that kind of led up to that, which for me goes all the way back to the day that I interviewed. You know, I saw two people of color throughout the entire interview process. Both were African-American females. One was a janitor in our building and the other one was working our front desk. So you can imagine, as I am sitting there waiting to be called back, staring at the gold and marble trim and the hunting dogs on the wall, I am thinking to myself, okay, well, you're probably not going to get this job. Clearly I did. And honestly, I learned quickly that initial experience was not at all indicative of who we at Consolidated Planning are. But it still just wasn't really a place where I saw much of myself. And I mean, I should say we do have offices all over North and South Carolina, as well as Georgia, with about 120 advisors serving those areas. So the diversity we did have was somewhat scattered and difficult to see. But even still, in my own office, having worked there for a couple of years, there were a few folks who would repeatedly accidentally call me by the name of at the time, one other woman of color working in the office who wasn't even in the same age frame and looked nothing like me. And I share these stories with you because I know that many of your firms are just like mine, where they've gotten a lot of things right, but where there is still room for improvement, especially in this area. So anyhow, fast forward a couple of years, Angela, as you mentioned, D&I has become buzzworthy. For me, this is exciting. I feel like this is a place where I can take some of my life experiences and add value not only to my firm, but to my community. And I stopped thinking of myself as being one of the onlys and as one of the first. And with that shift in mindset came a sense of responsibility for me. So I'd been chatting pretty regularly with a colleague about some of my experiences and where I thought some of our missed opportunity was. And he suggested that we invite our CEO to the American College's Conference for African American Financial Professionals. Now, Andy is our CEO, Andy Brinsfield. He is an amazing leader and all-around person, and I cannot say enough nice things about him, but I really did not know how this white male CEO was going to take our invitation to go hang around a couple hundred Black people for 3 days. I mean, I'm just saying. But he did. He took the invitation, and it was amazing. I mean, the impact that it had on me, the attendees, even those people at the firm that didn't, was massive. It sent a message. And I think for him, the conference is amazing. The speakers, the contents, yes, or the context was really wonderful. For him, what may have been most impactful was getting to experience, even if just for 3 days, which he's respectful of, what it felt like to be the minority in every room that he walked in. So when we came back from the conference, we were very intentional about keeping that momentum going. We started an African American focus group to really begin to strategize ways that we could be impactful in that marketplace, bring the culture to the firm, be more recruitable, which then rolled into a women's focus group doing the same thing. And then it just rolled into diversity and inclusion efforts all together. And when we were doing our recruiting planning for the next year, we brought those conversations to leadership, and it was there 4.5 years later where I finally shared with Andy, our CEO, and the rest of leadership, the stories that I just told you all. And that was also impactful. And all of a sudden, all of those things combined, things just became very personal to everyone, which is why I say for us, though we're aware of the economic value, we truly started simply because it was the right thing to do.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing the backstory and kind of how you helped not force change, but how you helped open Andy's eyes to see the bigger picture. That's awesome that you had that impact.
Thank you.
So Darlene, can you tell us a little bit about what attracted you to apply to your position at National Life Insurance Company?
Absolutely. So the story is similar to what Kristen just shared, because definitely when I visited the campus, it looked nothing like me. But what really attracted me to National Life Group was the authenticity of their culture. I went through probably 3 to 6 months worth of interviews. It was a long process. And what I kept waiting to show up is someone who would show me what the real culture was at National Life Group. I figured the conversations that I was having with people about do good, be good, make good, it wasn't true. So when was the real culture going to show up? I had just come out of a company where, you know, acquisition was their game at the time, and they allowed those companies that came in to keep their culture. We call that cause at National Life Group. What sealed the deal for me and what allowed me to move from a very comfortable position to an opportunity to drive change was I had an interview and a meeting with the president and CEO, Mehran Asadi. When I met him, I sat in this very seat that I sit in today, and a 15-minute conversation turned into almost an hour. And I recognized that the culture that they talked about was embodied in him. He lived it, he breathed it. He was the walking example of everything that the 15 or so people had told me about and that I wasn't believing. When I met with him, you could absolutely see it. We are based in Vermont and Dallas. Those campuses and the backgrounds of those campuses look very, very different. So what does that mean? It means that from a company perspective, when you see a leader born in Iran, educated in America, like Mehran Asadi, he is driving diversity and inclusion from the position that he is in, along with the people in National Life Group. What helps me grow at National Life Group is having access to an amazing coach, and I'll repeat that, having access to an amazing coach and an amazing leader. I have a support system in my teammates. We call ourselves teammates. I don't have employees. I don't have a boss. We are all teammates with a coach. I have excellent colleagues who support me along the way. And being a part of an organization that believes in learning, a continuous learning cycle that gives you feedback and tools that you need to grow. What has also been a growth opportunity for me here and keeps me here is one, the people at National Life Group, but them affording me the opportunity to associate with companies like NAFA, NTSA, and Women in Insurance. So WIFS, those are things that National Life Group supports from the perspective of allowing me to grow and fostering my growth. That's why I joined National Life Group, and that's why I stay with National Life Group.
So I'm noticing a trend. You know, these diversity and inclusion initiatives, it sounds like they need to be from the top down. That's where they're becoming most impactful and amazing. So I'd like to shift to Barbara. Barbara, what does it mean to you to be the first woman of color as the president and chief operating officer of a large life insurance company?
It's interesting that you start with that question, because when I was promoted to the role, I would get offended when I was either interviewed or there was an article about my new role. And it always started off with me being the first woman and person of color. I felt that that was somehow taken away from the fact that I had worked hard and earned the opportunity, and it didn't focus enough on my contribution and hard work. But then after doing some soul searching, I realized they don't have to be mutually exclusive. I am very proud to be the first woman and person of color in the role of president and COO at Ohio National. I hope that by being the first, that it inspires others and brings hope to little girls and women and people of color throughout the country, that they too can become president or COO or whatever they choose to become at a large organization. I am very proud of what I've accomplished at Ohio National. I decided years ago, probably at least 10 years ago, that Ohio National would likely be the company that I retire from. It's an amazing company. It has a strong 100+ year history. We have the best people. We serve a great mission and a noble cause, and to be able to say, hey, I'm contributing to that, and me and my team are truly making a difference in this world, it's satisfying to me. And so it means a lot, and I'm honored that I sit in this role and that we're doing great things as an organization. And so I take great pride in what I'm doing and where I am and what I've accomplished together with the Ohio National team.
I love that. And representation matters. It is very, very important. So I'm glad that your perspective on being the first has shifted. I think that's going to be very meaningful. So can you share with me, Barbara, a little bit about how having courageous conversations has led to an increase of diversity, equity, and inclusion in your organization?
I truly feel that you have to be the change that you want to see. And it's not enough to sit back and complain about lack of diversity, inclusion, and equity. You really have to have courageous conversations around differences. You have to be intentional in your quest to bring forth diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's what I've done with many of my colleagues. We are fortunate in that we have a chairman who's very open to the courageous conversations. Probably 8 or 9 years ago, I spoke to him about the need for us to make a change, to be intentional, to not only look within our walls at the home office, but also make sure that we are equipped to service our existing policyholders, be it someone who speaks a different language or goes about purchasing financial products in a different manner, but also to service our future clientele. And he was very open to the conversation and pretty much gave me free authority to pursue what I felt would require educating those around us about the need, not only the business need for diversity, equity, and inclusion, but also the fact that it's the right thing. It's the right thing for society in general to invite everyone to have a seat at the table, to be heard, and to have the opportunity to contribute their talents to a worthy cause. And so we started off by hiring an outside consultant. I was given budget to do that. They came in, they educated not only members of our senior management team, but also spoke to our board. We received a list of best practices to incorporate that had worked at other organizations in the industry. And we talked to our agents. We developed an agents diversity advisory board that was made up of individuals from diverse backgrounds with clientele from diverse backgrounds. And they really helped us to forge ahead in our intention to really change the game. I mean, from my perspective, financial security, financial literacy, financial independence, it all leads to freedom. It's foundational to moving things forward in the world and in our country. And we just came together with intention and made some things happen, and we built from there.
I love that. So how long did this that period last from having that courageous conversation to hiring a consultant to putting initiatives in place? Like, what does the timeline look like for that?
The timeline, it actually went pretty quickly because I was pretty aggressive. I remember saying to our chairman, I do not want to be the only person in the company talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I want it to be a part of our culture. And so hiring the consultant, presenting to the board, securing the budget, and doing things like hiring a next markets staff person to help forge and push forward with our field advisors. It probably took maybe a year and a half or so total, and we've just built from there. But see, I don't view this as a program or an initiative. It has to be a part of our culture. And so it's always evolving. It's not a one and done. It's how do you make it a part of your culture? And so I don't even like to call it a D&I initiative. It's a part of the Ohio national culture that we have to continue to build on. For me to be the first woman and person of color in the 100 and almost 11-year history, you know, it's about time. And so how do we make sure that there are other opportunities and that other individuals, people of color, women, can see themselves in that role at some point in the future? That should be a natural. It shouldn't be a thing, in my opinion. And so we're going to continue to forge ahead, and we have great people, we have great leadership, and I think we're doing what we need to do to make sure that everyone feels they belong.
And Angela, if I can add to her point, these are courageous conversations. We are individuals having conversations about our perspective of diversity and inclusion. Also representing the companies that we work for and the associations that we're affiliated with. We didn't check a box and check off with all of them to make sure that our opinions were in line. So to Barbara's point, as a leader of her organization, she's encouraging, and she poured into Kristen and I a couple of weeks ago about courageous conversations so that they can happen today. And to her point, you have to be willing to have those conversations to move the needle. And it should not always be those individuals who fit in what's considered the diversity minority box. It should be culture driven. It should be a part of the company.
So Darlene, just to piggyback off of that, can you give us an example of some of the courageous conversations that you've had within your organization?
I'll start this way and say that I have the opinion that diversity and inclusion is necessary, and it has to have a seat at the C-suite table. Executive row, whatever you at your company may call that, it has to have a seat at the table. Absent that, those conversations are dead on arrival because there's no strategic plan to support them or back them up. There are no company goals or initiatives tied to the success of those. It just becomes, just talk. So from a company perspective, to Barbara's point, it has to be a part of the culture. And at National Life Group, I talked about why I joined them, because I felt that their culture was authentic. Do good, be good, make good. As a part of the servant leadership tenets here that we are actually judged on as leaders and individuals. We don't get a performance review, we get an echo span, and it's made up of the 12 servant leadership tenets. A part of that is to be an inclusive and diverse culture. So it's ingrained in a part of what they do. Absent that, again, it's just conversation. Without that seat at the table and having the most senior leadership people involved and goals that are related to it, again, it's dead on arrival. For me, diversity and inclusion is a part of my being. It's everything that I strive to do, and that's being impartial. A lack of diversity to me reveals people and exposes biases right? It reveals what's underlying, and that is true too when it comes to corporations. Think about being in an audience where it's a diverse audience and you pull up a picture that doesn't necessarily represent that audience. The people are not receiving your message because it's not inclusive. So when you think about that from a company perspective, National Life really believes in the diversity of thinking and the diversity of experience. So for me, what I can say is I'm in the seat that I'm in today because we're not perfect. As Barbara said, we are not perfect by any means. We are a work in progress. But when you can have the courageous conversations about, I told you about the faces of the campus. Vermont looks very different than what Dallas does, right? I love being a leader on the Dallas campus, but I also love being a leader on the Vermont campus. So what does that look like for me? I'm in Dallas, I'm in Vermont, I'm where I need to be to continue to drive that D&I conversation. Having that on the table and a part of their goals invited me in as an educated, experienced African-American woman into a leadership role so that I could not only drive change for me, but I could drive change for others. Also help to drive change in the practices and the policies at the organization. So it has to be culture and what we call at National Life Group, cause-based in order for it to work.
I love that. And again, representation, you know, making yourself visible to others and showing others that, hey, I can do this, you can do it too.
Right. All I do is for you.
Yeah, very, very important. So you already answered my next question. My next question was, you know, do you believe that D&I should be a top-down initiative? And, you know, it's a resounding yes across the board. It's gotta be in that C-suite.
Add to that you can run it from any level, whether that's the people center, which most people call HR. We call it the people center because it's the center for the people to get what they need. You can drive it from corporate communications, customer service. It has to have a seat at the table and be goal oriented. So you can drive it from top down. A lot of times when things are driven top down, people don't buy into it because it's a forced concept. Barbara talked about that. I don't want to be the only one having the D&I conversation. When it's forced down, people are less likely to buy into it. When it's a part of the cause or the culture that your company stands for, people choose to opt into it so you can drive it from any level of the company.
That totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. So I'd like to shift a little bit because I know that there's some folks on this webinar that they want to know a little bit about how to attract diverse talent. So Kristen shared with me that they've been recruiting in minority markets. So Kristen, can you share a little bit about what your firm is doing to recruit in the minority markets and some of the results that you guys have seen from that?
Absolutely. So last year I noticed this trend where a lot of the people that I was reaching out to cold without any relationship to, the people that always said yes to having that coffee with me were similar to me. They were female, they were next generation, they were people of color. And I would bring them into the firm and they would often say to me, okay, well, who do you have there that's also African-American that I can speak to? And though we do have that presence, I would have to say, okay, well, I'm going to need you to call so-and-so in our Charleston location. It wasn't always present to the location that I was recruiting to. So this year we've been very strategic about making sure we have a good understanding of where we are, making sure that the minority groups we already have at the firm are well represented within leadership, within our advisory board. You know, this is honestly, well, let me backtrack. The stories that I shared with you all, they just happened last year. So we are a firm that is in the beginning stages, year one of our initiatives. And some of the things, you know, we don't have it all figured out. We're very realistic in knowing that this is the year where we learn a lot, we make some headway, but we don't get it all the way right. So we're working on making strategic relationships with companies in our area and organizations that we think do have it right. Not only can we learn from them, we can have a bigger outreach in terms of recruiting. We're revamping our marketing materials. You know, Darlene, you just mentioned if you throw up a marketing piece at an event full of a certain group of people and they don't see them there, it doesn't really speak to them. So we're trying to be better about making sure we create materials that speak to all different types of people. And I can tell you, it's a work in process. We're really having to change the conversation. Like I said, I myself went from viewing myself as being the only to the first. I'm kind of having that, if you build it, they will come conversation with people. This is, to some folks, a selling point. Depending on the marketplace, they may have less competition, at least within the firm currently, in that marketplace. So it's really just highlighting what we do have right. We are already a family-oriented company. We're a supportive company. I mean, I wouldn't have been there myself for 5 years thus far if that weren't the case. I like to tell everybody I'm pretty ride or die. I'm going to retire there if it's up to me, but really just highlighting what we do have right.
I love that. So at this point, since you guys are, starting your D&I initiative journey, do you guys have any measurements in place to see what's working and what's not working?
So, we're a firm that has a spreadsheet and a tracking system for literally everything that gets reviewed on a tracking basis. But I think with where our focus is right now, being more on that inclusion piece, I mean, many of you have probably heard the saying, diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. We're kind of focused on the dance. And I'm not a D&I specialist, but to me, those initiatives are a little bit more subjective. And Darlene, again, as you mentioned, we all have a certain amount of bias. So that's a little difficult to track. That's something we are still learning. But I will say something we do pretty regularly already is send out anonymous questionnaires or polls to our employees and staff and team members to do sort of a culture check. So we do have a diversity piece on that. And again, really just learning from our strategic partners, these are things that we anticipate on getting better at this year, and we look forward to that.
That's exciting. I love that you guys have started the process and you've got the backing from your leadership team. That makes a huge difference. So Barbara, tell us a little bit about what Ohio National is doing to attract and retain the next generation of talent within your organization.
We're doing quite a bit, actually. We, first of all, formed associate resource groups, which are outstanding, and our next markets officer is heavily involved in really working with not only our agents, but our recruiters to help educate on different markets and things of that nature. But one thing that we learned a long time ago, and when I say a long time ago, say 8-9 years ago, when we first started having the conversations about, number one, our clientele is very, very much like our senior officer team, which is, Caucasian and primarily upper income and things of that nature. We talked about the changing demographics, and we talked about the fact that the insurance industry serves a very noble cause and really helps to protect families, keep families together. And it's important that everyone has an opportunity to benefit from the products and services that we offer. But we also recognize that people do business with people, but not only people that they have something in common with, and individuals that they like. And so we felt it was very important for us to be intentional in trying to recruit individuals from diverse backgrounds. And one missing piece that we identified was we were not showing up where the opportunities existed. And so, for instance, the American College, African Americans in Financial Services, we had never sponsored or attended that event. We started sponsoring and attending. Women in Financial Services, we started sponsoring and attending. National Association for African Americans in Insurance. I mean, the list goes on and on. Being very intentional and deliberate about pursuing opportunities, understanding that not only would it be good for Ohio National, but it would be good for society in general, because we offer a product and service that is needed. Look at what's going on today. How many individuals who maybe are impacted by this horrid pandemic are in need of our advice, counsel, products, what have you. And so we've been very intentional, and we do track, and things have changed. I'm very proud to say our #1 agent last year was a female. Now and again, I say it's about time. I'm going to always be honest there. It's about time. It's not time to celebrate too much when you're still celebrating a first, but you have to start someplace. And so for us, when I look at our seminars and the composition, say 5 years ago, where it was primarily white male, and I look today and I see a beautiful, diverse group of individuals, different ethnicities and backgrounds and age and genders and things of that nature, I feel like we're doing pretty good. And so you really, intention keeps coming to mind. You have to be intentional, and then you have to care enough to measure the success. And so we are paying attention to who shows up. We are paying attention to making sure that we have the tools that our agents need in order to attract diverse clientele. We are making sure that when people visit our home office, that they see individuals that look like them. You know, it's an ecosystem, if you will. It all works together. It's a part of our business ecosystem. And so I would just say intention and making sure that everyone in the organization has an opportunity to play a role. And that's where our associate resource groups come in, because they're sponsored, they have executive sponsors, but they're led by our associates, and they are forging the courageous conversations. They are forging the change in relationships. They are lifting others up as they climb. And so, you know, I'm kind of mama bear when it comes to that, because it's like, I'm proud of what our associates are doing, and it gives me great hope in the future. And we've been around for over 100 years. Another 100 years out, the individuals that are leading the way today, their children and grandchildren will have something to look back on and say, my father or mother was a part of helping to take UNESCO or Ohio National to the next level.
I love that. Intentionality in showing up.
Right.
I mean, they're not overly complicated things, but they're very impactful.
Right.
So we're coming up on our time together. I can't believe it's flown by so fast. So I just have one question for each one of our panelists. So if you could give one piece of advice to either do or not do to an organization that is looking at a D&I program, what would that piece of advice look like? So Kristen, since you're up on the screen, I'll let you go ahead and answer that one first.
So again, as a firm who is in the beginning stages, I think what we're learning is, you know, D&I is very vast. So I think you have to really look at what makes sense for your market and your community, the places that you want to have an effect in, as well as your firm, and you start there. So what I mean is, you know, if there are already folks in your firm, leadership or not, who are very active in the, you know, the women's community or the LGBTQ, whatever it is, I think that's where you start, because it's really no different than a financial advisor tapping into a new marketplace, right? First, you go to those people you already have relationships and trust with, and you start there. And I think once you get the playing field, the groundwork done, you can then translate that easily into other minority groups.
Thank you. Darlene, any advice for companies either to do or not do?
Absolutely. You have to have D&I in the C-suite on executive row. One thing not to do is doing diversity and inclusion in isolation. It has to have a main platform where goals are associated with it. You are measuring them and holding people accountable. National Life, we believe if you learn it, you pay it forward. Barbara talked about that. So pouring and being poured into. As I close, I will say it is not about who is driving diversity and inclusion, but about the fact that it is being driven in your organization.
Thank you, Darlene. Barbara.
I would say be the change you want to see. Don't wait for someone else to start the conversation. Also, to recognize it's not a program, it's not an initiative. It must be a part of who you are as an organization. It must be a part of the culture. Be the change you want to see, be intentional, make it a part of your culture.
Thank you so much, Kristen, Darlene, and Barbara, for taking the time to have courageous conversations and your willingness to share your insights. And thanks to the guests of the Diversity Symposium for showing up today. Change in any capacity cannot happen without open and honest conversations. Thanks for sharing your voice. As you can see, $1 million budget isn't required to execute a successful D&I program. A true desire to bring everyone to the table, give them a chair and an opportunity is all it takes. Each one of these women have had courageous conversations and have lifted others up on their way. And so I want to challenge you. What are 3 things that you are going to take away from today's conversation to implement into your D&I program? If you don't have a D&I program, what are 3 takeaways from today's panel that you're going to use to start your program? So NAIFA is committed to diversity and inclusion. So please stay tuned to NAIFA's Diversity Task Force, Diversity Symposium on ways to help continue to build an inclusive culture in your organization.